All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at Rhepodcast. This is Isaiah Diesel, and I'm joined today by Darrington and Robert. You guys say hello.
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 Rob, you've done a little bit of writing throughout your time. But speaking about writing, what are some of your who are some of your favorite writers?
It's hard to pick one favorite, but if I had to say, I love David Eddings in particular. I do like Tolkien, the one who introduced me to fantasy, even if he's a little bit predictable. But David Eddings is a huge influence on me. I loved his work, the Elenium and the Tamuli series. I highly recommend it. Another one would be Gary Jennings. He wrote the series Aztec, centered in Mesoamerica around the time of the Reconquista. Or sorry, not the Reconquista, the arrival of Cortez in the lands of the Aztecs and whatnot. That was really wonderful series. Can't recommend it enough. Really vivid characterization.
Darrington, let me ask you a question. Who are not only some of your favorite writers, but some of your favorite genres?
Genres, I love high fantasy in particular. I like historical fiction. There's another wonderful book I would recommend called The Hot Gates. The writer is an actual historian, wrote about the Battle of Thermopylae. I can't recall his name offhand, although if you look up The Hot Gates, he's done a lot of wonderful stuff centered around that period. I also like, and this may be a little bit embarrassing, but I'll admit it, I like the isekai genre. That's where you're the trapped in another world or gone to another world series. Type of series. A lot of it is just like straight up power fantasy stuff, but when it's well done, it can explore a lot of very interesting issues. Problem is just most don't do it well. But that's true for most genres. Almost 98% of anything is garbage. And then you have some wonderful standouts out there. And
I think the isekai is an interesting genre because when you're mixing modern storytelling with sort of fantasy or sci-fi, it gives you a good opportunity to play off of the different tropes and kind of point them out.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. Isekai is a really awesome genre to get into if done well.
If done well, yes, it can do wonderful things, but most don't do it well, but that's true again for most series. I do like science fiction. I love Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine. I love that stuff when I was younger. I hadn't really gotten into any lately, but those were classics of my youth and I loved them.
Anyone want to take a guess who's my favorite author?
J.R.R. Tolkien.
God.
He hired ghostwriters. Hey, to be fair, he's not an author. He's got ghostwriters.
Oh man, that was a good one, Robert. That was a good one. Speaking about God, actually, did you say your favorite author, Darrington, or your favorite genre?
Oh gosh, sci-fi in general is sort of my favorite genre. I like. It's interesting that you brought up isekai because I think anime and manga have really inspired me to go outside of like the normal comfort zones that I would be in. So where sci-fi and fantasy blur tends to be the areas that we explore in those particular medias. So
a little, it's nice to get exposed to some kind of foreign media at some point. It really gives you a different perspective than the one you come up with. We kind of take our own worldviews for granted most of the time. And then when you're exposed to something completely new, it's like, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at things.
Yeah. Like what's the difference between sci-fi and fantasy when, time travel is involved or, you can have these sort of blends.
To me, there really isn't much of a difference. The only time a real difference comes up is when they try to make the technology something that could actually in some way function. When they try to base it on real scientific principles.
Yeah.
That's really the only difference. I mean, otherwise it's just magic in space most of the time, which is fun. You know, I don't think there needs to be a hard line between the two, and sometimes it is a little bit blurred.
Have either of you guys heard of Malcolm Gladwell?
No, can't say that I have.
Yeah, I have a couple of his books on my shelf, actually.
Outlier and Blink. There's some good ones.
Tipping Point.
Outliers is really good. Another one of my favorites is Freakonomics. You guys read that one?
That sounds really familiar. I might have heard of it, but I don't think I read it.
So these are all nonfiction, right?
Yeah, I really don't mess around with fiction so much. I have The Alchemist is one of my favorite all times, but I really don't. I mean, a tiny bit. Let's see, The Remains of the Day is one of my other favorites, but I generally try to focus on nonfiction. But both of those books, especially in terms of the podcast and what I'm trying to do, the themes that they have in there are very pervasive and not exactly always having the answer that to the question that you might assume is right. It might be right, but for a totally different reason. And I think if you read both of those books in conjunction with each other, and also as well my other favorite, which is The Invisible Gorilla. You read those three books, and it really just shows you like, wow, maybe it kind of just questions all of reality. And so I think when you read them, it gives you like a sense of humility that, hey, maybe you don't have all the answers, and maybe your perception of reality is totally off. Speaking of perception of reality, I want to ask both of you if you think that it's possible. By the way, you got two anti-theists against me right now, so it's a bit of an uneven match right now. But I do want to ask you: do either of you think that free will is possible, and/or is it a good thing?
Okay, this is going to get complicated, so I will try and simplify it as much as possible. The first thing I want to say is, my personal view of discussion and debate is that the point is not victory, but progress. So yeah. I don't really think of it as being against one another unless there's points being tallied for somehow. Yeah. I don't know how that works. But moving on to the free will question, I think it really kind of depends on how you define free will. I mean, how much, it really gets very difficult. If it's all in our head, if it's all our brain is doing all these decisions, that's us. Is that free will? Or is it only free will if we're the meat puppet of a ghost? And would that soul, that meat puppet user, thereby be free will? And what if it's not? I think it really kind of depends on how you define it. The best definition I've ever heard for free will is very simple: the capacity to have done otherwise. Now, I have a cup of coffee in my hand, and I'm choosing, I think, to drink it. If somebody took a dump in this coffee, I would put this cup down. Now, I would not drink it. Could I choose to do so? Every fiber of me is saying, no, don't touch that cup. Boot whoever did that out of the house. Am I technically capable of making a choice that runs counter to all of my desires? Arguably, yes. But I can't imagine a scenario, short of a gun to my head, where I would make that counter choice. So am I really making a free choice or not? It gets very iffy. So really, depending on how you define it, I either accept free will or I don't. It really depends on your definition.
Maybe you don't have a choice which way or the other.
Yeah. Ultimately, it comes down to it doesn't matter. Because if we have free will, we can't get away from it. And if we don't have free will, we can't get it. So it becomes an academic question. Whether it's good or not, I hate to keep going into semantics, but then what is good? We can, a child rapist choosing to engage in child rape is no less damaging than one who has no actual choice. It's still damaging to the person. So the question of whether or not it's good or not depends on what we happen to be doing at the time and how that impacts those around us. I think I'm making choices and I have no other choice but to act as if I am. So I don't know how satisfying that answer is, but it's probably the best that I can give.
So what about you, Darrington?
Well, I work in software in the real life. So I'm used to this conversation about what agency is. And I think, when we talk about free will, it's almost an outdated term. Like that, it sounds to me like something that 500 years ago was a really interesting conversation. Today, it just doesn't make any sense at all. Machines can make decisions, and they have the capacity to have done otherwise. And in a lot of cases, in ways that the programmer doesn't even really understand. So what we talk about in software engineering is agency. Does the machine have the ability to have repercussions? Can we hold it accountable for having made the decision that it made? And generally, you can't. But you can hold humans accountable. So I think, like if you study Dan Dennett, when he talks about reductionism and determinism, what he says is we don't really have free will. We have this abstraction that we think about as free will, and that's good because as a social construct, we can use that to hold people accountable and determine who is a good choice maker and who is a bad choice maker. That's actually kind of something that you might implement if you were trying to determine which of your computer programs are good choice makers or bad choice makers. Is you just say, if you make a bad choice, you go to jail, or if you make a bad choice, there are consequences. There's a penalty for that. And good choices have benefits. So if I'm a good choice maker, I get to continue to drive my car. If I make bad choices while driving my car, I get my license taken away from me. And that we as humans interpret as free will.
But first of all, I'm not entirely sure from either perspective, from the Christian perspective or from the atheistic perspective, like a just materialism perspective, that it's really possible. Like, I don't know, it's not insanely obvious to me. I had this belief that the whole tabula rasa, like you come into the world blank on a blank sheet of paper. That if that were truly the case, and I don't. Again, I really do not know one way or the other, but it seems like everything that you wind up thinking, because I live in South Korea, and Eastern way of thinking is just totally different than Western thinking. So it's really hard to get into their mindset. And I've lived here for 10 years, and I try to, but I understand that there's just certain societal constructs have happened inside of their minds that it's not likely going to change anytime soon. So it seems like that, and then you have how you're raised, and it seems like there's a lot of how your parents are raised. It seems like you could take that back for infinity until, I don't know if you want to call it the Big Bang, which I personally believe in, but it seems that we have an illusion of free will. And I have a hard time reconciling that inside of Christianity because I don't personally believe it's a good thing, because I believe whenever you have too much freedom, you can abuse it. And so, but that being said, there is something inside of in philosophy, Christian philosophy, called I think it's called like monalism, and it's like this belief that like God knows exactly how you would respond in every last situation. So like that's how you're created. So it's kind of like in between free will and Calvinism. So it's like
Calvinist.
You really couldn't have been any way differently,
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think about determinism though, like inside of materialism?
I have my doubts about determinism for the same reason I kind of have questions about the concept of free will. I suppose hypothetically, if you had a demiurge that knew what every atom was doing at every moment, could adequately predict that, or accurately predict exactly what was going to happen, then you could say that everything was determined. But I don't necessarily believe that that is predictable. I think we know that there is an element of randomness. Now, I don't know how much that plays into what is predetermined to happen, or if there's maybe something beneath that evident randomness that in fact is creating a pattern we just can't detect. I honestly don't have a very strong opinion on that. If somebody can make a determination, no pun intended, that things are predetermined, great. That would be interesting information, but it's not something I feel strongly about one way or the other.
So, the topic today we're going to be discussing is going to be your writing and just maybe creativity in general. And whenever you write a character, Robert, have you ever found that you're trying to really see or think about how this person might respond in the way that you've written them in some kind of way, giving them some level of free will? Or do you believe that that you're just dictating it to whatever you think, would be rational, or however you would do it in a situation?
Honestly, sometimes this kind of actually makes me sad because I love my characters. I love the ones that I create, and I feel a connection to these characters I create. I know on an intellectual level they don't actually exist. They're just fictional creatures that I have created in order to craft a story. But there is a common thing that happens in writing, and some people call it character rebellion, where you're trying to write them doing things a certain way, thinking certain thoughts, undertaking certain actions, but it never works. And what in fact happens is that it's like the characters want to do something different, and it doesn't work until you kind of let them do it. The author of Calvin and Hobbes, the great comic book or newspaper comic writer, he often said that he never wrote a thing. He only just watched what Calvin did. It's not that the characters are necessarily free. I don't think they have their own will, but it certainly feels like that on occasion. And when I see how they grow independently of my initial intentions, I love seeing that happen because it creates something unexpected for me. And it's a wonderful feeling to see your own writing kind of come to life that way.
Wow.
So is that a consequence of like their characters being consistent with how you've established their characters?
I will create a basic core set of ideas, ideals, background stories, so on and so forth. And I do this almost obsessively sometimes for characters who are not significant or not important, or who aren't necessarily at least the main character. But I can see how they kind of flow from that and grow through those experiences. I'm a big believer in character arcs. So even a small character can have their own little arc within a story.
So is that something you've always done, or is that something that inspired you to become a writer in the first place? Because I know people who kind of do that naturally.
I really don't know any other way to do it. I know a lot of people like to talk about how they crafted their own success and wrote their own destiny and everything else. But the truth is, in my case, I almost stumbled into all of the wonderful stuff that I have done. I loved stories ever since I was a kid. I knew I wanted to be a writer, but real world concerns always took precedence, and I put it off for a very, very long time. But once I started, it just felt natural to do it that way. And I don't know any other way to do it.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. One, how long you've been writing, and how many books or essays or whatever have you written?
Honestly, I would have to pause all this and go count to see how many I've written over 4 million words over the course of the last 3 years. December 2018 to present, over 4 million words, spread across a multitude of stories. I just started the 7th book in the Who Endures series, which is now up to chapter 8. It was planned to be a 10-book series, but it's kind of a running joke that I'm terrible at estimates. The first thing that I ever wrote was called God Rising: The Cult of Vines. It was a fan fiction set in the Overlord universe, and I wasn't working long hours at the time. I had free time, so I sat down and wrote the story that I wanted to read. And I said, okay, well, this will be a good way to kill 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be 10 chapters, 30,000 words, and I'll move on. And it will just be lost into the ether of the internet. I'll just let some people enjoy it and go on. It grew to be 1,046,000 words in sum, along with another 800,000 plus side stories, then 2 sequels, followed by the current Who Endures series, which is now in its 7th book. And I kind of, yeah. I was really bad at estimates, and every time, and like every month, I'd be like, okay, there's another 10 chapters, and then I think I'll be wrapping this up. But it just kind of kept growing, and every new story or every character, well, not every character, but most of the major characters all kind of had their own arcs. And then I started testing myself to see how much I could produce at any given time. So when I took a 10-day vacation, I sat down and I wrote Under the Stone Sky and Dark Plains, which were both side stories to the main story, which were taking place in the same 7-day period. And I did both of those for a total of about 100,000 words in that 10-day period.
That's insane, man.
Yeah.
Is this is the
Niche,
universe?
Yeah.
This is the universe where there's magic and
you know, there's magic and undead and dragons and all this other stuff.
wow.
Within my little niche, I'm regarded as kind of a machine because I produce so much so fast.
That was the word I was going to use.
I
Beast.
If I go without writing for too long, I start to get a little twitchy.
So Robert, I got another question about, be honest with this, okay? Have you ever written a person or scenario that you actually desired to happen in your own life, or enacted revenge upon someone? Because did you ever see the movie A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger?
Yes, I love that movie.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
You know the guy who's like naked, they find him naked.
Yeah.
And
you left me naked for a day, I will leave you naked for an eternity.
yeah. So at some point, I'm not giving away any spoilers here, but at some point he winds up, I guess, losing all of his money from gambling. And he tells the guy like, "Oh, I'm gonna get revenge upon you." The guy who took all of his money, and the guy's like, he's like, "Really, you're gonna get revenge upon me?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Every flaw, everything, I'm gonna eviscerate you in fiction," is what he tells him. So I thought that was funny that was going to be his revenge, you know, to write about him. And so, have you ever sought to do something like that or fulfill something in your life that you haven't been able to do or you want to do?
This is hilarious. All right. So all the stuff that I write, I release for free. I take Patreon support for people to basically pay me to take the time off of work to write this stuff. And I take commissions to write things. But when I first got started and the story that I was writing started to explode in popularity within that series community, I started seeing entitled people and like, you need to, focus on this one story. Because I would work on 4 or 5 stories at a time. And I would release multiple chapters in a day. And there was one person who started to get on my nerves. Because anytime I didn't upload for the one story that they wanted, because they didn't like the other stuff that I wrote, they just wanted that one story. That was all they wanted. And they would lose their minds anytime I wrote anything else. You need to focus on this. You owe it to us. You owe it to me. We made you popular. You're nothing without us. And I'm quoting here. This is things he left in reviews. He would get on these long rants. And then I finally had enough of it. And I said, look, stop doing this. I write what I want. I'll get to it when I can. And there was one time I didn't upload within 5 minutes of my expected time. And he left a review saying, "You're late," as if I had a deadline to write this stuff. So I finally lost my mind on it. He was always coming in under a guest account called Guest Reviewer. That's how it reads. All right. So I created a character called Tessig Reaver. All right. An anagram of Guest Reviewer. I made him an obnoxious, entitled, spoiled, noble brat that was getting executed by his least favorite character in the worst way possible. And I used his statements in his reviews about how entitled he was as that character's final words, and the thing is, the guy recognized himself when he got to that chapter.
Oh my God.
Tirade. Was it petty? Yeah, I shouldn't have done it, but it was satisfying, and I won't apologize for it because to this day it still makes me laugh.
And that's how you get deeper and richer universes, right?
You know, the thing is, other reviewers were kind of ganging up on him too, and like, why are you doing this? This is free content. It's coming out almost every day. The average writer for those areas usually would release once a week to once a month, but I was doing sometimes a couple of chapters in a day. Why are you complaining? It was just crazy. But that was fine. And he did stop after that. I mean, I guess he didn't want to be eviscerated further, but yeah, that would be an example of where I took a little bit of revenge on an obnoxious individual. Petty, yes. Satisfying, also yes.
Yeah, Rob, you really better watch yourself, man. He sounds like he could turn into one of those Kathy Bates types.
Yeah.
For Misery, you know.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, I want to ask you another question. Is like, where do you draw inspiration? And I found from my writings, I'm now trying my hand in fiction. I've written about my experiences, my travels, living overseas and doing volunteer work and things like that. But I'm trying my hand at fiction. And what I found is that it's impossible to completely create something out of nothing, And so you have to incorporate elements of either something that happened to you or someone who you met 10 years ago. And so do you find that yourself doing the same kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. I draw a lot from history, mythology, culture. I plunder everything. One person can't possibly create everything they need. We all build on the foundations of the ones who were before us. So any half decent writer will tell you that there's a wealth of human experience to draw. How they lived, how they loved, how they died, mourned, followed, led, and what they believed and why. So I draw, the whole world is my resource to draw from. And I draw a lot from different cultures and experiences. And, some of my characters are combinations of different people. And the main character of Who Endures is an elven assassin named Nua Callan Iwanor. She is a combination of Cesare Borgia, Cosimo Medici, and Niccolo Machiavelli.
Wow.
So she's a combination. She draws characteristics from each of these: the ruthlessness, the devotion to her loved ones and to her family, her ambition, her relentlessness, her cunning use and manipulation of economics and politics for her own ends. It has created a richer character because I had these other historical figures to draw on for both her good traits and her bad ones. So, and I do that for almost everything. You'll sometimes, if you ever read any of my stuff, you might see characters who it's a little bit more obvious because there is some element of their source's name embedded in their own. So.
Yeah. Hey man, if somebody out there is listening and is interested in getting into writing as a career, how do you get into writing, and what advice would you give them?
Okay, so there's a couple of pieces of advice I would definitely offer. The first is, this is going to sound strange to some people, but I would suggest starting with a kind of a fan fiction. That's how I got my start, because you start with a built-in audience of people who want to read. You don't have to start from being nothing. All right, you start within someone else's creation, expand upon it. Learn about character development by seeing how people respond to the characters and scenarios you create. You get honest criticism. You don't have to hunt and peck and beg for feedback. People will tell you exactly what they think of what you're writing, for better or for worse. I would also say write every day. All right, make a habit of it, even if you have to set aside a 15-20-minute block. If you want to do it as a hobby or as a profession, set a minimum word count for yourself. The average writer does between 500 to 2,000 words a day, with 1,000 being the happy medium that most do. Now, myself, I'm kind of an outlier because I will do 5,000 or 10,000 words in a day, and I set a weekend goal of 20,000 words, per day on my days off. I don't always reach that goal, but I aim high, and if I fall short at 15,000 words, I'm shedding no tears. But produce something daily. Even if it's not good, you're getting in the habit. Habits are king. All right. Kind of the free will argument there. about habits. Read about writing and study the world around you, because no matter how creative you are, you've got a whole world to draw from there to
Hey,
help you.
Robert, what you got to do is you got to aim for the stars.
Mhm.
And if you don't get the stars, you'll at least get the moon.
Hey,
Right?
that's a good expression. I like that. But yeah, that's those are things to keep in mind. Read about writing from those who are already masters of the craft. They say a smart man learns from his own mistakes, a wise man from someone else's. And I certainly made my share of mistakes. I mean, my early work, my later work, I mean, they say you hate everything you produced 5 years earlier, and that, seems to be going strong. I did some things well, but if I could go back and start over with all my current knowledge, I would have written very different.
What are you drinking right now?
This is just coffee with, some hazelnut creamer in it.
Oh, I live in South Korea, so I kind of just have to live off of the little mixed things. And what's your favorite coffee, Darrington?
Oh, we just get some coffee beans from Sprouts and grind them ourselves. I really like the deep roast stuff. So any like Italian or French roast, and then lots of cream. So I got French roast and French vanilla this morning.
Ooh, I love that.
We should have a French vanilla versus hazelnut fight battle.
Yeah.
Actually, Irish cream, the Irish.
Oh,
that one's really good. Yeah.
I don't really care for the Irish cream. I tried it. It just doesn't taste right to me.
Well, you're an atheist, so your opinion doesn't really matter. But no, speaking. What about let's go for what about your favorite alcoholic beverage, both of you guys?
Bourbon.
Tequila.
I'm not a big fan of tequila. I like Four Roses.
I really like crafted beer, but I really like Samuel Adams. You got the brewery, and I think it's over in Boston. I think it's Boston, but you go to that, and then at the end, they literally pull out like 10 pitchers, and like you drink all you want there, man, for free. So,
yeah.
But what about like you guys do any wine or?
I do like wine, but I don't drink it much. But if you want to go with beer, I got to go with Arrogant Bastard Ale. Brewery. I want to say it's out in Arkansas or something, but they do amazing stuff. Very heavy, very thick, but it's fantastic.
I'm notorious lightweight, so like half a beer, I'm done. A shot of tequila. That's why I like tequila, because I know one shot is exactly the amount that I'm done. So yeah, I don't know about beer. I never really thought beer tasted good. People are like, yeah, you got to try this chocolate stout or something like that, and I'm like, yeah, it all tastes like bad to me. So you guys can have your beers.
Well, back in the day, I was an absolute alcoholic, like my pre-Christ life, and so for me, it was a matter of just wanting to get extremely drunk, like pass out drunk, throwing up all over the place, fighting drunk. So at that point, it was just a lot of hard alcohol. And I really didn't care about the taste of any of it, because that wasn't the point to enjoy it. The point was just to get drunk. So, but now, I'm married. I have a wife and daughter. So getting out pissed drunk is like not even an option anymore. So sometimes we have some drinks around here, just the house, watch a movie. So I've learned to enjoy it, to savor the taste and all that. But speaking of savoring the taste and just really enjoying something, I teach like a literature class, and I was trying to explain to the children why we were talking about what was better, film or writing. And they said that, well, obviously they're younger, so they said, maybe movies. But I was talking about, well, that's the thing about, about writing, is that you can immerse yourself into that for weeks or months, and it's a prolonged experience, So you ever found yourself like really, really, really inside of a book to where you just feel like you're right there?
Yeah, that certainly can happen. And the thing is, I don't think it's necessarily that either one is better than the other, but I will say that writing offers more creative options. You can do more in a book than you can with a movie or even with a TV series. You can offer more characters and perspectives and subtext and subtlety than film typically allows for. I mean, you have to cut out a lot in order to tell a major story in a movie or TV series, no matter how, I mean, especially if there's a big cast of characters. Like if anyone were to take the Who Endures series and try and turn it into a anime or a live action or something like that, or a movie, they would have to cut out about 80% of the characters in order to do it, because there's just so much going on. You'd have to trim it down to the core elements. So that's one thing I like about books, is you can do more with them.
I find myself more like, because books force you to use your imagination, you can become more immersed in them. You know, things take on a life of their own without the book needing to necessarily spell it out. Your imagination fills in the gaps almost seamlessly. And a book is the only situation, I don't know if you guys have ran into this. Have you ever been reading something, you're really into it, and then somebody comes in and turns the lights out, and you get that headache from being like ripped out of the other reality?
Yeah. Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah.
That's frustrating. You know,
don't get that with movies.
No, you know. That's, you know, when you're a good book that does more showing than telling, and that's, I didn't say this before, but good advice for writers. Show usually beats tell. The difference between showing is telling is he was tall. Showing is he ducked his head beneath the door frame as he entered the room. You're showing his height rather than telling you his height. That's usually better. But sometimes you just got to get information. Anyway, but yeah, that's I definitely can get sucked into a good book, and that's what I try and create when I do these things.
There's a movie I referenced to you, Darrington, because the guy has a name very similar to yours. His name is Darlington. Remember I told you about that?
Okay. Yeah.
By the way, where's your name from? Is that like, it has to be European, right?
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Welsh. But I know there's a town in England and a town in Washington here in the States.
Called Darrington?
Yeah.
Wow.
So one day I'll visit and I will point at the sign and be very narcissistic. But that has not happened yet. So it's definitely English. It may be Welsh. Puppy dog.
Oh,
this guy was demanding attention. Little Japanese chin.
Aww.
Actually, Robert, just this week, just yesterday, I read a book with my children here called The Last Dog, and it's like a short sci-fi movie about like the future where they think the dogs are extinct and they find it. And I was trying to explain like what subtext is, like when you're not have to say something directly, you know. And South Korea actually, I'm not sure if you guys aware of this, but we eat dog here. Yeah. So I've had it quite a few times, but
I've heard stories.
Yeah, they're true. It's kind of hard to finish it though. So if you can't finish it, you could just take it home in a doggy bag. I'm gonna put the sound effects on that one. So, but anyway, yeah. So I was telling about the subtext, and it seemed like it was really pro like dog. And I actually never, the reason why I didn't mind having a dog is eating dog is because I never owned a dog. But recently, last year, we got a dog for the first time, and my daughter fell so in love with it. So I think I'm a lot more reluctant to eat it now at this point. I might still eat it in the future, but having one and seeing the way my daughter just fell in love with it was amazing. How many dogs do you have?
6.
What was that?
6.
6?
Yeah. 4 Japanese chins, like this breed, and a French bulldog and a Labrador retriever. So.
Darrington, you got any pets?
Yeah, I've got a German Shepherd and a Pit Bull.
They get along?
Yeah, they get along really well. It's actually perfect because the German Shepherds like to work. They're easy to train. Pit Bulls want a lot of attention and they're very high energy. So they basically work with each other. Like,
Wow.
They make a
uh,
good team, huh?
yeah, I teach the German Shepherd. The German Shepherd teaches the Pit Bull,
Wow.
and go on with their lives.
Yeah, Labradors are like that. They're easy to train, and they're essentially working dogs. They're meant for tasks. I mean, they're very smart. They're easy to govern. They're very eager to please. They're very good with kids and families and whatnot. So,
My sister doesn't have any children, so she's had her dog for like the last 13 years, and I'm just devastated because I know within the next probably 1 or 2 years the dog's gonna die. And so I know she's just gonna be devastated. So I put like this, I always thought it was insane why people get so attached to their dogs. You know, I always thought there was no logic behind it. But then I saw it wasn't even so much about my relationship with the dog, is that I saw how happy it made my daughter, you know? And that was like, I mean, literally my daughter would walk in the door. It was no longer like I became irrelevant. It's like she went straight for that dog. And at first she was so afraid of it. And then yeah, so do you ever incorporate you talked about some animals, some spiders and stuff. Do you ever incorporate much about animals or try to ever teach some lesson about them or something? Like what's the purpose of the magic that you were talking about with animals?
well, so in the Who Endures series, that's not the case. That was in the story Scales of Trust, in which case I wanted to explore how maybe evolution would work in a fantasy setting where magic is an actual force. So you have, for example, animals that live a very long time might incorporate mana and gain the power of speech. They might incorporate some other element of the natural world and gain intelligence similar to humans. And how might that shape the societies of other already naturally intelligent creatures? So you get a kind of a look into these kind of societies through their eyes. I haven't done as much with that as I want, but I want to do it as a multi-book series. So we'll see how that goes. But the main characters for that one are not necessarily animals, but it's the focus is on a young woman named Ayente. All right. Now, for this book series that I'm going to be doing, I actually created a full-blown language for it that was fully functional, and you could actually use it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Thul Iyar, the listener's tongue. And since language is to some degree a matter of perspective, I shaped the language according to their culture. So in that Stone Age society, the word for help and the word for person is the same thing, because only those who help you are counted as people. If they, it's very dehumanizes their enemies more effectively. And the word for danger and stranger are the same word, because the unknown is inherently a threat. So creating this kind of insular cultural experience was really interesting, and I had a lot of fun with that. But the young woman is kind of an outcast within her own tribe. She's an untaught genius. So, when she encounters her counterpart, who comes from a more advanced world that has like medieval level technology, like late medieval stuff, he recognizes the implications of the things that she's developing. Like she invents agriculture. She doesn't do it perfectly. Like she doesn't recognize the danger that brackish water has and whatnot. So there are certain efforts that are doomed to fail, but these are the early steps. It's a society on the verge of great change. So you've got like the first merchants are travelers between tribes who have developed ties between one another. You've got the first the first farming efforts, the first professional military corps that is starting to develop a warrior class within their culture, as they're taught fighting as something more than you do in the instant, but as this is how you focus your time. So they start to see more class divide. There's a whole thing about all the things that she starts to invent, trying to help the people that she can't really be a part of. So there's a lot of elements to that. It's a lot of fun to write. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I love writing these kinds of interesting what if kind of scenarios and portraying things as they might have gone. Like the accidental invention of beer is what was going to come up next.
So when you're developing this, excuse me, is it like progressive iteration, or how do you come up with your ideas and how do you develop them into?
Well, I'll start with a general broad concept. What is something nobody has done before? Usually in something that is your standard isekai, a guy gets, isekai to another world. He gets a harem of women who are interested in him and superpowers, and then wish fulfillment begins. What I wanted to do was something very different, something where there could be no romantic component. And I wanted to set it in a unique setting. So a Stone Age world has not been done before. A young woman as the protagonist in an isekai is exceptionally rare. It's been done, but usually with, there as an ascendance of a bookworm, which is a wonderful series that I highly recommend. They're a small child. I wanted to do something that was different. And then from there, I'll start doing research into the subject. Like, how is beer made? How could that be developed by accident? I watched a documentary called The History of Beer. It's wonderful, very interesting stuff. I actually bought some obsidian and did some practicing making some spearheads to get that experience, so I could more effectively write the scene. Cut my fingers up a little bit doing it, but it was that practice that let me write the scene more vividly. Research is king. If you know about a topic, even if you're not an expert, the more you know about it, the more vividly you can write it, and the more it will connect with your readers. I mean, you can always just make stuff up, but it doesn't always ring true. So when you bring it out in a realistic sense, it connects with the readers on a deeper level, even if they don't realize how real that you're making it.
So I got one more question, and then I want to hit you guys both with the lightning round. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You call me Zeus today because I'm gonna lightning bolt both of you guys on some theism stuff. So real quick, last question. How do you overcome writer's block?
I never get writer's block. I know that sounds weird, but I really, at most what happens is I'm like, okay, I'm not sure where to go with this story, so I'll do this one instead, and I'll just write a different story. So I really don't get writer's block because it's been a problem for me.
So I told Darrington last episode that I didn't like him very much, but I'm gonna tell you flat out, I hate you. That's just not fair.
I know.
That's just not fair. Okay. With that being said, I was gonna ask for advice how you overcome it, but I guess you don't have any advice to just.
There's one thing I can tell you will probably help you, and that is pick some good instrumental music that is set according to that you want to write, because we know that music affects the brain very profoundly.
Okay.
If you pick some mood music, you'll write better.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, so I'm gonna hit you guys with a quick lightning round, and you got to answer these questions as fast as possible. 1-2 sentences at most. And are you ready?
Sure. Lay on, Macbeth.
Yeah,
Okay. So if you guys, first of all, let me clarify one thing. You guys are both anti-theists, correct?
I am. I don't know.
I am.
So I think I know Darrington's position, but Robert, as an anti-theist, do you believe that God just doesn't exist, or you do believe he exists, but you're against him?
I believe it just doesn't exist.
Okay. All right. So if you could choose any one religion that would be true, which one would it be and why?
Can I pick a fictional one that doesn't exist in the real world?
Okay. Yeah. There's no rules against it.
Okay. Then in that case, I pick the one that I created for the Who Endures series, The Faith of the Black. That's the one I would pick. Because it's, do you want the why as well, or just?
In one or two sentences.
Okay. Okay, because it's very big on personal improvement and social responsibility.
Okay, that's good. Darrington?
So I'd say simulation theory, probably my absolute favorite. This is all simulation. We're basically playing a video game. Some of us are NPCs, some of us are player characters. We don't know who's who, and the goal is to get the top score.
I like that.
I'll tell you this: if you ever want to see a movie about that, that's really good. Look into the 13th Floor. It's one of my top 5s of all time, and it's about that same concept. So before becoming a Christian, I was really interested in Buddhism, and I probably would have went to Buddhism myself. I even got like can you see this? I got a Buddhist tattoo. You can't really see it, but I got some Buddhist tattoos on me. But okay, next one. Which Bible character would you like to be, or would you want to be if you had to choose? And don't say I wouldn't want to be one if you had to be one. All right, not Jesus, because that's going to be blasphemous.
If I had to be one, that's a tough call.
Moses, like you want to be able to split water? That would be pretty cool.
If I had to pick one.
Darrington, you want to go first?
I don't know. A Nephilim. Can we pick Nephilim? I want to be a Nephilim.
You want to explain what the Nephilim is?
Yeah, those are the Herculean, like half angel, half human offspring. That were apparently giants.
Darrington,
that's a really good choice. That's a really good choice.
All right. Well, now I can't pick that one because you did. I would pick that one if I could, but if I had to pick one, it's a really
too slow.
Call. But I would have to say it would either be Joseph, not of the coat of many colors, not of the other Joseph, but it would either be him or it would possibly be the unnamed Pharaoh from the Mosaic story. Because because I like the idea. They're both in a manner of speaking, they both live lives of service. The Pharaoh to rule, and Joseph became an important figure within Pharaoh's court, ordering the day.
Anybody want to take a guess on mine?
No, I couldn't even guess.
Isaiah, hello. Kind of given.
You pick your namesake. That's a little bit of a trope.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, last one. Last question. All right. So if God had a favorite band, what would it be?
Favorite band? I think God would probably be a death metal fan. So.
Death metal?
Well, sure. Look at all the
Darrington.
Tenacious D.
I mean,
Jack Black. God's totally a fan.
Darrington must really like them because he also said that would have been the Devil's favorite band.
No, I think it would be both the Devil's and God's favorite band. I think that's the one thing they're like. They get together. They go to concerts. Like that's their thing.
Before I was a Christian, I was really interested in all the world religions from like a purely anthropological study. I thought it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating, why all these people around the world had a belief in God, whether it was a frog or a rock or something. I found it genuinely fascinating. I went into Palestine and I stayed in a mosque for like a week, and it's a very amazing experience. But that being said, I'm a little bit, maybe have some little unorthodox views concerning things like the Nephilim, because I think it's very well possible when you read the descriptions of the Nephilim, the Bible actually says that they refer to them as like the heroes of old. And so I'm very open to the idea that it's possible that maybe some of the gods like Hercules or from the Egyptian mythology like might have actually existed, and they it would certainly it certainly, from my perspective, would make sense why a lot of people would have thought that they were gods. For if you did have angels, celestial beings coming down and breeding with human beings, and so it might be kind of like an ancient aliens type topic. Maybe you can come on for another one episode like that, Rob. What would you think?
I mean, how should I put this? Okay, so I would say it's certainly possible that like some of the gods and spirits and demons and other figures are half-remembered folklore based on real figures or events. Even in Preparatio Evangelica, Preparation for Christianity, which was written early on in the history of Christianity about the superiority of that religion over the others, suggested that Heracles was a real king of Argo, and that after his death, his followers just got carried away and basically deified him. I can certainly say that's a possibility. You know, people love building stories and telling tall tales, and it's not beyond the realm of possibility that these half-remembered folklore are based on real people, you know, in a distant past and just writ large. I don't lend any credence to the ancient aliens stuff. A lot of that has a very nasty history. Like the people who were saying, "Oh, it had to be aliens who built the pyramids because the Egyptians certainly couldn't have done it." It has some very, very nasty history behind that. So I don't lend any credence to that. And
well, maybe
I don't see any evidence.
Maybe the next time we'll just discuss that issue, because I definitely do believe in aliens, and even if you look at the Bible, the book of Ezekiel
I think it's
describes
certainly possible.
what pretty much I think anybody who read the book of Ezekiel would describe that as an alien. So with that being said, we really want to thank you for joining us at RHE Podcasts, where we're using respect, humility, empathy to talk about some issues. You know, we're also trying to use a little bit of comedy to say, hey, you know, we can discuss things, we could disagree, and that's fine. You know, that's what being an adult is that you're not going to agree with everybody all the time. So that's what we're trying to do, and I certainly enjoyed myself today. Did you guys enjoy yourselves?
Yes, that was fun.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to meet you, Robert.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you guys again, and thank you for joining us today. Goodbye.